Hello, friends. Good to have you with us here on Marriage Talk. Thanks for joining us and subscribing, whether it's on YouTube or to the audio podcast, or hey, you can do it to both, and it still costs absolutely nothing. Isn't that amazing? Bill Hobson here, along with Jay and Laura LaFoon. And if I were truly going to act out the theme of today's podcast, I would just sit here for about 12 seconds in an awkward pause because our conversation today will focus around the idea of to linger, learning to linger. Now, several years ago, I was at a golf resort between Atlanta and Augusta called Reynolds Lake Oconee.
Oh, yeah.
And on that massive, sprawling 5 or 6 golf course property, they have a restaurant called the Linger Longer Steakhouse. And I would be happy to linger longer back at that steakhouse at some point. I'm guessing that's not what you're talking about.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, sticking with golf, since we all, the three of us like golf, Jack Nicklaus on tournament days, what was his habit? He would do everything as slowly as possible. He would eat his breakfast slowly. He would drink his coffee slowly, because what does that do? It allows you to focus. And we live in such a fast-paced world that we don't, for lack of a better word, stop and smell the roses enough. We don't linger in the idea that, we reflect. When you linger, it gives you an opportunity to reflect on different things.
I think of lingering as like sitting in a Starbucks with a friend, cup of coffee, and you sit there for 3 hours in the afternoon and you're just talking. You're just sharing life together. And I'm a lingerer. I love to linger. I'm very slow. Jay does not like to linger. And he does not like, I like to take my time doing things. And it is because I can focus and I can think. Sometimes I have to think out loud. But that lingering, that it conjures up in my brain a picture of just sitting on a front porch in a rocking chair with a cup of tea and just sitting, just sitting. We were on vacation. Well, we were in Florida for 2.5 weeks.
Working in Florida.
We were working in Florida, and we got home this weekend, and we had to go to a convention this weekend, and we were like, why are we so tired? We just got back from Florida. Well, Florida wasn't.
It wasn't vacation.
It wasn't vacation. We were working
work.
in Florida. Even though
not complaining a bit because it was Florida.
We'd be sitting in the sun by a pool. I had my computer and was working the whole time. And so there's that. I think there's that part of lingering too that's good for your soul. That's good to rejuvenate.
This is shameless self-promotion. It's why we love our Celebrate Your Marriage at Grand Hotel.
I was just going to lead us into that part of the conversation because you have to linger there.
You have to. You can't go at breakneck speeds on Mackinac Island.
Just coming down the hill on a bike.
But yeah, just the whole idea that when you step off of that boat, it's like the whole world slows down. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And that's why it makes such a great marriage conference for us, is because the husband and the wife, they slow down together and really gives you time to reflect.
But really what we're talking about today is what keeps us from lingering. What keeps us from lingering in our personal lives, what keeps us from lingering in our marriage. And obviously it's, we live in a fast-paced world, and people who linger are probably looked at as being lazy, or I'm just speaking from what Jay calls me, lazy. You just want to sit around and do nothing. I mean, my favorite time in Michigan is the summertime, when we sit on the back porch with a fire and
till 10, 11 o'clock at night.
And
now that I don't mind.
So what keeps us from lingering is the stuff in our life that
I think we're afraid to linger because we're afraid to observe. When you linger, you have time to observe, and this is kind of where we're going with this. Linger long enough to begin to observe your junk. All of us have junk. All of us accumulate junk, and I'm not talking about physical junk, because every household in the world has a junk drawer, and
we have two.
We have 2 junk drawers, and what happens in a junk drawer? It gets more full and more full and more full until you finally go, I got to clean this thing out. And then all that stuff that you've been keeping, you what? Throw it away. Because it's junk. That's why it's in the junk
And
drawer.
lingering allows you to observe your junk. It allows you to slow down and say, what is it that I need to prune out of my life? What do I need to
What
put
bad
aside
habit?
for a season? Yeah.
What are there people that are bringing me down? Are there habits that are bringing me down? Are there habits in our marriage that we've fallen into that aren't
Mhm.
healthy? And it doesn't have to be monumental, not healthy. It could simply be we stopped kissing each other when we leave the house. Oh my goodness, that's not healthy,
Mhm.
you know.
I
So
would take us back to the hotel for a moment. With grand intentions, no pun intended, I have declared that it is time to go sit on the porch. Go grab a rocking chair. We're going to sit on the porch because this is the appointed time for that, right? So trying to schedule my lingering is probably not where we're wanting to go with all this. And so like 11 minutes in, after you've rocked for a while and you think, okay, what's next? Where are we going?
Yeah.
I'm so bad at just soaking in those moments. That's really am. I feel like I've got to go do something. If I'm going to sit here, I'm going to go down to the gym and work out. I'm going to go ride a bike around the island. I'm going to do these different. Um, Meanwhile, my wife may be really just wanting to just sit there and linger, or maybe it's vice versa, and she wants to go do something, and I want to sit. Um, I don't know.
11 minutes in, I'm snoring.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we're
I
just
mean,
wired differently or what, but
I'm either going somewhere. I'm thinking about let's get going, or I'm going. Okay, it's time for a nap. Yeah.
always looking at the watch, always checking to see if I'm going to be on time for whatever is 4 hours away. And we get to this particular place, and we remember it's island time.
Yep.
Mhm.
And if I want to go from point A to point B, it's going to be by my own foot power, or on a bike, or maybe on a carriage somewhere. But it's not going to be speeding up any hills and quickly getting anywhere. Cruise ship, same
Exactly.
kind of a thing. Cruise ship,
Yep.
I take a couple days to stop reaching for my phone because I'm not, I purposely don't connect it to
Yep.
any activity. But man, there's withdrawals from a busy world, from a life that is always bombarded by texts and emails and pings and Zoom calls and real meetings in person and all of those things. So how can we help people get to that decompressing and disconnecting point where they may want to do it, but how do we do it?
Well,
I think you do have to be intentional. So, not, you said you've declared this is the time to go sit on the front porch. But I think there is a part of that in the world that we live in where you have to be intentional about, what, this day. For a lot of people, it's a Sunday, we're going to go to church and then that's all we're doing. And we're going to maybe not turn on the TV. Maybe everybody gets a book, or maybe we play a game, or whatever it is, but you're just being. And I think you do have to be intentional with that. It's not, because it's just like anything else. If you're not intentional, it's not going to happen.
right.
Maybe not schedule it, so to speak, but I think you do have to be intentional about.
And I think back to your cruise ship analogy with your phone. Yes, the first couple of days you're reaching for your phone, but then what happens? You stop reaching for your phone and begin to realize that this new normal is not a bad thing. And I'm feeling less stress. I'm not worried about tomorrow. And then we get off the boat.
Then you hit US soil, you're back in Miami, and I got my phone again.
Yeah, and it all comes swooping in. But to take moments, days, weeks, whatever, and intentionally slow down. I mean, it's the old story about the explorer that hired a bunch of natives to help him get going, and he pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally on the third day he said, all right, let's get going. And they said, no, we're not going anywhere today. And he said, why? And they said, we have to wait for our souls to catch up with our bodies. And I think that's indicative of the way we live life in this culture, is that our souls are 6 months behind us because we're moving at such a breakneck speed. And that soul is really who you are. It's
Yeah.
the core of your being. And it's who you offer to your wife or your husband as part of the marital experience. And so I really the idea that we can't teach you a technique. It is simply to do or not do. There is no try, as Yoda would say.
Well, for anybody who's now 10 and a half minutes into listening to our conversation and thinking, what are they talking about? I don't have any problem with this whatsoever. Think about your emotional state the day you have to go back to work after a long, lingering, disconnecting vacation. When you sign back in, when you punch the clock metaphorically, and all of a sudden, everything that was in that inbox during the time where you had the out of office autoresponder on is
Mhm.
waiting for you. It's in the hundreds of messages. And you just sit there and you're like, I want to go back to where I was. Right. So there's value in the lingering idea. And it's not always because of an exotic vacation. It's not because you traveled the world and had the presidential suite at the whatever. It could just be that you've carved out some boundaries for yourself and your spouse to turn things off and to disconnect. I mean, this in my world, for me, that's the hardest part. It's not doing the thing at 9:30 at night because I have nobody else who's going to do it the next day.
Mhm.
So maybe that lingering is kind of along with intentionality. Maybe it's realizing that it's not always a getaway. Maybe it should be a regular part of our life pattern.
Well,
Right.
I think we've got a great example. What did God do on the seventh day?
Yeah.
I mean, he rested, and that is a biblical concept for a reason. Farmers rotate their crops, and every 7 years they let the soil rest. Good farmers do. There's something about that being in a rhythm where you practice resting, you linger, you wait, you don't rush. There's something very biblical about it.
And it's hard. It's hard to do in practical terms. To say, we're not going to do anything on Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening because churches want to have Bible studies or they want to do a get together, whatever it is. Sundays seem to be as busy as any other day of the week. And for when you have children in your home and everybody's going 1,000 miles an hour to say, you know what, for this season or on this day of the week, do not schedule anything. Your sports can't happen, whatever it is. And it's very practically difficult to do, but it's very good for our souls and our hearts. And I think for our physical health to be able to take that time to linger a little longer.
I'm okay. So I'm flashing back a few years to a place in Michigan's Upper Peninsula that you folks know very well. It's called Piatt Lake. My family has had a place there my entire life. And up until, boy, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 years ago, on Sundays at Piatt Lake, you were not allowed to swim, to use your boat, to fish, to use this beautiful lake. And because God has such a great sense of humor, every Sunday was 85 degrees and perfect. And so
The
this,
Upper Peninsula.
oh, it was just remarkable. And you'd sit there on the deck of your cottage or just stand there by the edge of the lake because you could get your feet wet. Now, we're not trying to be prudes here. You could get your feet. And I would accidentally fall in. I fell in a few times, just lost my footing. I mean, what are you going to do? I happened to be wearing a swimsuit. But you would also see the same people who made those rules. You could follow the dust trail of a procession of vehicles Sunday afternoon driving to Lake Superior from my lake. And they were going to Lake Superior to do exactly what they had prohibited from happening on the lake where they had a home.
Right.
And just the mind-blowing hypocrisy of all of it. I mean, I won't get into all that as to how the leadership has continued to just baffle and amaze up there. But after a lot of discussion, it was brought to a vote. And I do believe up until maybe recent events of 2 years ago, it was the most contentious vote in the modern era of that Bible conference community around this lake, because you had people who said that this is supposed to be a sacred time of rest. And then you had families who were saying, this is how we define rest.
Yep.
This
Yep.
is rest. This is what we do. And if you need to take a nap, then go right ahead. But, and so we have in our audience, I'm sure, Jay and Laura, we have a wide array of definitions of lingering,
Right.
of rest, of recharging, of spending quality time together and not rushing through things. How can you help establish a framework of linger definition so that we know what we're aiming for?
Well, one of the words that I love to use is recreate to recreate. And we're talking about lingering to recreate your soul, to give your soul rest. And so whatever it is that allows you to do that. And for us, we're not going to have meetings on Sunday, but we're going to go play golf because we enjoy that. It's good for our souls to be outside
And in
in
the
the
wintertime,
sunshine. Yeah. And well, pickleball is a little more difficult. No, it's not. There's just a different difficulty, as I said that. But it's whatever it is that allows your soul to stop with the day in, day out list. I guess that would be the word. For me, lingering can also mean sitting on the patio and reading a book, but I'm not going to do that every day of every week. That may be today it's a lingering reading book, but tomorrow I'm going to go play 18 holes of golf.
And I think as a couple, you have to communicate about this. We talk about the fact that as a couple, you need to play together. That's a whole different topic. But what is play for one couple might not be play for another couple.
Yeah. Okay.
And so find your what play means to you. Find what linger means to you. If lingering means we're going to go for a boat ride around the lake, then by all means do that, because we've got friends that's exactly what they do.
To get on a pontoon boat, sit out in a lake and putt around and talk, and
that's their linger, and it's wonderful. For others, it may be sitting on the porch and reading a book. That's not for me, but you need to find out what works for both of you and build that into time together. I have learned that one of Laura's love languages is sitting poolside. If there's
oceanside or lakeside where there's water.
And so our whole thing is I will gladly join you there because I know you love it. It's relaxing for you as long as I have shade.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll either take our own umbrella or we'll sit at a place where I can get an umbrella, and I will sit there and I will linger the way I like to linger, and she will linger the way she likes to linger in the shade, in the sun. But listening to the ocean is one of the things we love to do, just the rhythm of that ocean. So find out what it is that refreshes your soul, that brings you back to the Lord. And you'll appreciate this, Bill, but people, I will often tell people, one of the places I feel closest to the Lord is on the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, sure, right. You just want an excuse to go. No, you're walking on beautifully manicured creation. This is God's creation, and someone has cared for it so well that it's beautiful. And you're breathing in fresh air, and you're hopefully not cursing. So it's one of those times where I really enjoy God and his creation is when I'm golfing, and that rejuvenates me.
Yeah, same here. And to do that, I've told a lot of people over the years, they ask me what my perfect definition of a wonderful afternoon is, or a time on the golf course. And I tell them, if I can get out there and walk the course and it's late afternoon leading into dusk, and there's not a lot of people on the golf course, and, a deer comes out or whatever, it is so pastoral. And it is so serene, and you cannot help but be thankful to the Creator for all that has not just the architect of the golf course, but the creator with a capital C.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's very powerful. And for other people, they think that sounds like a trip to the dentist office with no Novocaine, right? And so for somebody else, it would be jumping on a four-wheeler and going on dirt trails and being covered with mud and coming back in and just loving every minute of it.
Yep.
Whatever your definition of linger, and as Laura said, recreate to recreate, whatever that is, that's how God has wired you.
Mhm.
We're all a little different. Some have told me I'm a little different than most. Um, you don't have to like the same things I do. I definitely don't have to like the same things you do. However, within your marriage, how important is it for some degree of either compatibility or
Compromise.
flexibility to be in all
Yeah.
of this?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is because, I am not a beach lover, but I've learned to become a beach okayer. Laura, she's always loved athletics. And so for her, once the kids got a little older, to take up golf, it wasn't on the top of her list, but boy, it started climbing once she's learned how to play. So find stuff that you have in common. And if you don't have anything in common, then start looking for silly little things like, what if we took a cooking class together? Or what if we went to a comedy show together? Just start with things that maybe both of you might like, and find out that maybe you really do like them. And the idea of doing them together in the same way that it breathes life into your own self when you recreate and linger, it breathes life into your
I think
marriage.
it's also important. It is very important to find one or two things that you can do together. But I think it's also important to give each other the freedom to go and linger alone. Because again, it's all about refreshing that soul. And sometimes you just need a little bit of time apart, to just a short little, it wasn't really that big a deal, but Jay had a phone appointment last night at 7 o'clock. I could have sat in the office and listened to the phone appointment. But I said, you know what, I'm going to go downstairs and sit by the fire and read my book. And that's what I did for an hour. And it was refreshing. And yeah, he had to work. I didn't, but
Story of my life.
but allowing each other those times that you just say, you know what, go and do that. And have that time to refresh is very important.
I'm reminded that part of what you two offer to couples and to churches is some coaching, and as well as your events. How often does this concept get presented in those settings? Is it common? Do you lead with it? Because the idea of lingering and slowing down in a very fast-paced society seems like it would have great value to it.
We definitely do almost every time when we're up at Grand Hotel and do our Grand Hotel event, because the island lends itself to that.
Yeah.
In our coaching, we also talk about this idea of the recreation and how important that is in your marriage. Our date nights, not so much, because those are 90 minutes. We're in, we're out kind of a thing. But it is a constant theme in our books and our teaching. And certainly what we believe is that rhythm, that lingering, is critical for marriage.
What takeaway would you like to leave people with today? What's the final button to conclude our conversation with when it comes to this learn to linger?
Don't be afraid to slow down. Don't be afraid to slow down. It's scary at times. I know, for those of us that like to go, do, but you can find real joy in quiet moments.
And I would say, as a couple, if you're listening to this podcast and your spouse isn't, maybe start that conversation. Or if you're listening to it together, when is a time that we can schedule that lingering? Because you have to be intentional about it. But when is a time? Where can we do? What would we want to do? Can we do it on a weekly basis, a monthly basis? But begin that conversation of, how do we slow down?
Okay, so you know how the human mind works, especially mine, which is very bizarre. So now I'm reminded of this scene from Taxi. Those of you who are too young for Taxi, go look up some episodes. But Christopher Lloyd plays Jim Ignatowski, I believe is the last name of his character. And he's taking a driving test. And because it's a taxi company, and for some reason, his other taxi drivers are in the room with him while he takes the test. I've never really figured out the logistics of that, but he gets to this question and they're trying to help him cheat. And he's saying out loud, "What does a yellow light mean?" And one of them from over on the side says, "Slow down." He goes, "What does?" And they do this like 4 times. And the last time he's saying it so slowly, it takes him 30 seconds to get out the "what does a yellow." And I'm on the floor every single time. And I cannot help but now think that the theme for this episode should be a yellow light,
There you go.
encouraging us all to calm down.
Slow
So
down.
Exactly.
appreciate the insight and appreciate all you listening. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and you can check out the podcast notes for more information on Jay and Laura. You can also go to jayandlaura.com. And as we say every episode, we would love to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, thoughts about what we've just said, or maybe you have a special request for some insight you would like to see addressed on a future episode, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week here on Marriage Talk.